Hare Krishna. Psychology is a subset of, not a substitute for philosophy. Nowadays, many people think that psychology can substitute for philosophy. By psychology, they usually refer to anything that helps pacify their mind and makes them feel good. And philosophy, on the other hand, refers to things which the inquiry about the nature of things. So, what the truth is, what the mind is, how things actually are, people don't bother about that as long as those things work for them. So, such a non-philosophical approach may seem pragmatic, may seem practical at one level, but it is deceptive in the long run, because the people are eventually left with nothing but a life history of trial and error methods, trial and error experiments with feel good pop psychology. Pop psychology is popular psychology. Feel good pop psychology means any psychological ideas which help people to feel good. And trial and error experiments with feel good pop psychology means people try this one out, this method out, then try that method out, and then try that method out, and then try that method out, and eventually the new methods may have some initial promise, but they end up disappointing them. And that's why we see that despite the plethora of pop psychology ideas and methods and insights, so-called insights, the number of people with mental health challenges all over the world is increasing, not decreasing, and not just increasing, but it is increasing in alarming proportions. The World Health Organization considers the mental health challenges to be the biggest health challenge of the present century. Now, psychology is no doubt important. The Bhagavad Gita also gives insights about psychology, but it places psychology within the broader philosophical perspective that the Gita shares. So the Gita's philosophy states that actually we are not our body, we are souls, and as souls we are parts of God. And just as a part is best situated when it is harmonized with the whole, similarly we can have lasting peace of the mind only when we are connected with the whole. That is, now the whole manifests, the whole is God, that is Krishna. Now the Bhagavad Gita states in 2.66, Nasti buddhira yuktasya nacha yuktasya bhavana nacha bhavyatah shantir ashantasya kutah sukham. Nasti buddhir ayuktasya, nasti buddhir ayuktasya. That actually there cannot have buddhi if there is ayuktasya, if one is not connected with the absolute truth. Nacha ayuktasya bhavana, nor can one have bhavana, that is spiritual emotion, or we can say that the mind which is steady, which is used for experiencing emotion. Nacha bhavyatah shantir, and without a steady mind one cannot have peace. Ashantasya kutah sukham, and without peace how can one have happiness? So therefore, the important point to understand here is that without understanding the whole from philosophy and without connecting with the whole, we cannot have lasting peace of the mind. So psychology cannot be a substitute for philosophy. It is a subset of philosophy. That means once we understand the overall philosophy of who we are, then we can understand who we are and what the purpose of our life is. Then we can understand what the mind is. And once we understand what the mind is, then we can practice, then we can learn how best to discipline it. So now, if we just use the feel good criteria, then we end up actually feeling worse, not feeling good, because one thing works for some time. It works because the mind just likes the sense of newness that is there in that thing. But then once the newness wanes out, the mind starts, what's the use of this? And then we shift to something else and something else and something else. And that's how we never get any lasting shelter. So when we practice bhakti, we can actually get a lasting shelter if you practice it philosophically, not psychologically. Philosophically means that we understand with philosophical perspective what is happening, and psychologically would mean we practice bhakti as long as it feels good, and philosophy will help us understand why the feel good criteria can mislead, because the mind requires bhakti will ultimately help us to feel good eternally when it connects us with the source of all happiness, source of all good feeling, Krishna. But for that we have to redirect the mind from the world to Krishna, and that redirection requires disciplining of the mind, and the mind resents this field, it resents such disciplining, and because of that resentment of the mind we feel not so good while practicing bhakti at sometimes. So we need to persevere, and if we can just persevere, putting aside our temporary bad feeling, knowing with philosophy that ultimately we are going to get everlasting good feeling, then we can march ahead, and then lasting peace and bliss await us. Thank you. Hare Krishna.